I need to fight honorably. But sometimes I think I buried my courage alongside the old man.
Within every man, there are many men. So be brave. Be just. Be tall.
Alright, so let us talk about the full season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, right?
Right.
This is
Yeah, I did not watch this. I heard it was okay, but because I kind of checked out on Game of Thrones, you will tell me. I heard good things about it.
Oh wow, well I'm genuinely surprised that you did not see this, right? So
No, I don't. I was. I think I tell you I wasn't going to watch it. Like I was like,
okay.
yeah, well,
I,
I heard it started strong. But I was like, I kind of checked out on Game of Thrones, but I heard it was doing something kind of interesting, and I was hearing decent enough scuttlebutt in and around the film. So sorry, the series, especially when it wrapped up. Like, all right, cool.
Alright, well okay, so I guess I'll talk about it on my own, right? So yes, this is a spin-off and miniseries from the Game of Thrones universe, right? Yeah, so this is actually based off of some novellas. Well, I don't know how much novellas were made from this, right? That George R. R. Martin wrote, right? Way back in the 2010s, called Dunk and Egg, right? And
Okay.
that's just the mere fact that now we reach a time where we've moved past just how much of a disappointment, or I should say how much of a letdown that series finale of Game of Thrones was, right? Like, listen, to
Right.
this day, I will never forget the push for that seventh and final season, right? Oh, in Trinidad, that is, right? Oh, we're gonna run these episodes in IMAX
Yeah.
on Sunday night, man. So I
Yeah,
kind
well,
of begin to imagine people who went to cinema one
yeah,
on
for
that
real.
fateful Sunday night and watch that finale. I watched it
Yeah,
on
real
the
good.
Monday and I just said, "Oh, that's how they ended." Okay, and I literally just moved on with my life. That was it
Yeah.
for me. I did not go into flame wars with,
I,
with
I
fans or
still,
whatever. I was just like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay," and I move on.
yeah, I still haven't. I don't think I still haven't gotten a good answer as to why they couldn't just get new showrunners for that. Well, you know, but that whole thing was. I remember thinking it's a bunch of okay ideas, but just bad execution. I remember I watched that like way after everybody done when all the old noise done. I just sit down and watch it on my own, and I just kind of just slowly nodded my head on like, all right, well, they're on a time here, they're on a thing here. Clearly, they could have shoot this better. But like none of it was like on paper bad. Like in my opinion, right? Even the whole who get the Iron Throne at the ending
Yeah,
and who take
like
over.
on
Like
paper, that's fine.
on paper,
It
that's
just it
solid,
just
solid
didn't
writing.
feel
But
satisfying.
the whole thing was just super rushed and thing now.
That's the
But to
problem.
this
They
day,
rush this
right?
thing too much. Yeah.
And then we have the first prequel thing, which is okay.
Well, House of
Milialkov,
Dragon, which I'm gonna
House
get
of
into.
Dragon, right?
Yeah.
Right, and they could go all over the place with it. Like it's a franchise, so we'll see. But this one I heard is okay.
Yeah. So about House of Dragon, right? That is a show that I think have redeemed the franchise,
Right.
in the
Me
eyes
too.
of
Yeah,
the
I think so
diehard fans,
too.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially how they build upon what we saw over those past 7 seasons of Game of Thrones, right? How they explain, it's the main war and all that kind of stuff, right? How they build off of that, right? And it's so interesting because in June we're supposed to get the third season, and as I said in my review of the second season, while that second season was all about the threat of war, well, what I saw from that trailer is like, yep, we gotta get that war, and I am all excited for it, right? So, what this show is about, right? Before I get into what really amazed me about this show, right? It's pretty much a very simple story about a knight by the name of Sir Duncan the Tall, right? He's called Dunk for short, right?
Right.
When when the show opens, we learn that he was pretty much the squire for an older knight, right? So that means he was pretty much following him about as he goes on his merry adventures. Dude pretty much treats him like shit, and they pretty much set it up very early that like Duncan pretty much was treated like shit by a lot of people, right? Because
Right.
he is so tall and large, right? He's not muscular really, but large, right? Yeah, people like to think, oh, he's a fool and he looks stupid, and yeah, because well, I should say in the first few episodes, yeah, he's very naive, he's very wide eyed, he doesn't know a lot about the world that he wants to get into, right? And this world is jousting, right? Which we have seen on Game of Thrones and House of Dragon, right? Yeah, so he wants to be involved in that whole jousting lifestyle, right? But unfortunately, because his sir as an SER, died, like a while back, right? He has nobody to serve under, right? So he has to pretty much like find his way into that, right? And he gets involved with a few, Targaryen people, So yeah, House Targaryen pops up as well too. There's some names that pop out. I'll say, even though I
Correct.
am not versed in all things Game of Thrones, when you hear certain names, you're like, oh, that's the guy that they mentioned in Game of Thrones, who's the descendant of XYZ, right? As you mentioned, this show is actually set between House of Dragon, and Game of Thrones, right? So yeah, some of the characters that you see here, Targaryens and whatnot, yeah, are the are the ancestors of these characters that you will see in Game of Thrones, right? So it's like that, right? So if you're a GOT nerd, you're like, oh, okay, that's the character, okay, right?
Right. Right.
But yeah, along his journey, he runs into this kid, this bald-headed kid, sorry, by the name of Egg, right? And I will not dare spoil what his actual name is, right? 'Cause that was a big reveal, right?
Okay.
Even though I am not versed in all things Game of Thrones, but they dropped that reveal, I was like, oh,
Okay. So
that
here's the
actually
thing.
kind of smart though. Shit.
There's only one character. Only one character I could think of is that character. So that's about it. But I don't know how far. I don't know how far but far before or after the events of Game of Thrones this is. There's one
Yeah.
character I can think of this. Yeah. So that's about it. I don't know the timeline. Though.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
But that one character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know the timeline neither, right? And
Right.
I don't think like it's centuries between this show and Game of Thrones, right? I highly doubt that. It probably is like a century or whatever, or two, I don't know. But I don't think it's a lot of time, right? Same thing with the space between House of the Dragon and this show, right? I don't think it's too much time between, properties, right? But yeah, what we get
Right.
here basically is, yeah, these two individuals who are in this mucky, grimy, dirty, filthy world, and they set up right from the gate just how dirty and filthy it is, right? So just to jump into the review here, right? I could see, on the trailers making fun of this, right? Yeah, there's a lot of crass humor in this as well, right? A lot of like scatology, like let us say not a lot, but there's like the occasional scatological joke or like a character taking a shit behind a tree, or somebody
Right.
taking a piss near a river, right? It's that kind of vibe, right? It's pretty much demystifying, and this is what both properties, both Game of Thrones and especially Game of Thrones, right? And House of Dragon did so well, sort of demystify the medieval adventure, right? Demystify the sort of Eurocentric adventure film, right? It's very like these very cynical, very scheming, very backstabbing characters, right? And yeah, Duncan finds himself in that world, right? Because he is just trying to make it into that Jocelyn world, but people just looking down at him because of how he look and because he has not like his sir or master, if you will, died, right? And throughout the show, they acted as if, oh, we don't know this guy, and he just worked for us on some war, and yeah, he do his job, but like he wasn't no big legend as you making him out to him, right? So for one thing, I kind of flat out love how the show kind of deconstructs its own world, right? The Game of Thrones
Right.
universe, right? Because yeah,
Right.
with Game of Thrones, it was always been about legacies, like, oh, I am the descendant of X. That means I am destined to get the Iron Throne. I'm destined to rule this and blah blah blah, right? It's a lot of characters who are driven by their legacy, driven by what their descendants did before, or their ancestors did before, right? And well, with House of Dragon, it's no, I don't want to be a part of this. But listen, like people coming against me, people coming against my family, I had a man up, I had to do what it is I had to do, and then whatever happens there, whatever happens at the end of the day, my legacy will live on, right? So you can just sort of see how the decision making in House of Dragon sort of trickles into what we see in Game of Thrones, right? That's pretty much the heart of it, right? But this one is like, yeah, kind of deconstructing the world. It's kind of showing it in a more cynical way. It's a lot funnier than I expected to be, right? And yeah,
Right.
for me, I feel like the jokes mostly land, right? Yes, you will get your very bit you'll get your little juvenile humor ever so often. Like you'll get like a fart and shit joke ever so often. But again, this is the world, right? It's characters who just kind of don't give a shit, right? So that's what it is, right? I can see this guy who isn't noble in the traditional sense, but he wants to be noble because this is how he thinks a knight must conduct himself, right? And he's constantly being
Right,
told,
right.
well, yeah, that shit kind of don't really matter. It's about who you know, it's about who you work for, it's about who your family is, and kind of how that matters, right? But then when you get roped into bullshit now, it's like all that stuff that you mentioned that matters doesn't really matter in the long run, right? So yeah, to me that's the heart of the show, and yeah, that's why I kind of flat out really enjoy the show way more than I expected, right? So no surprise, this is beautifully shot, right? Just sweeping vistas, just great visuals from start to end, right? I thought that the performances were fantastic across the board, right? And this is a show where you don't even need to know, oh, this person is the ancestor of X or Y. You just have to know a name. You just
Right.
have to hear a reference and be like, all right, I'll just sort of mentally piece together who this character will be later on or his relevance later on, right? But it doesn't take away from the story, right? But I would say if you're a Game of Thrones nerd, you'll be like, oh, okay, I understand even more now, right? But yeah, I thought that Peter Claffey, right, who is this real life rugby player who, I think
Right.
like this is his first transition into acting. Yeah, I thought that he was great in this, right? Very likable, very relatable. He's the underdog in the story, right? And you kind of need that character in a story like this, right? Because you want the man to succeed, but it's just all the politics and all the bullshit and all the disappointments. Because yeah, he goes through disappointment after disappointment after disappointment just to make it big, right? Also, mad props to Dexter Saul Ansel, who plays Egg as well, right? Brilliant performance from this kid, one of the best, child performances I've seen in a long while. And even he at all, too, especially given who he actually is, right? I like how he also views the world in a similar way, right? Like, yeah, why should I follow this path? Why should I do this thing? Why am I destined to do X, right? Why can't I follow my own path, right? And yeah, that's why he pretty much tags along with Duncan. He wants to be his squire, right? Even though he shouldn't be in that role, right? But I wouldn't spoil anything beyond that, right? Supporting actors are great as well, and how they worked into the story is pretty cool as well, right? What I will say, I do this will be a disappointment to a lot of people. This is not a action heavy story. There's a few very grimy, very violent action scenes, right? And there's something that I will say without spoiling much equates to a battle sequence, and that absolutely works as well, right? And that is in the penultimate episode, as is true with Game of Thrones, right? They always leave that second to last episode to throw the big guns, right? But what they do with that is very subversive as well, right? Because it kind of takes what you would expect from Game of Thrones or House of Dragon, the two seasons that we saw already, and subverts that as well, right? Yeah, so yeah, I could see that being a nitpick, right? Oh, it's not, an action heavy show. Where's the war scenes, man? Where's all that
Right.
stuff? I have to spoil this, right? But listen, this was not a disappointment for me because they pretty much justify why, right? I will not say how they justify it. You'll have to see the show for yourself. How they do it was very good, right? But yeah, unlike Game of Thrones and unlike House of Dragon, this is a dragon-free show.
Yeah.
And I think that absolutely works because what this show is ultimately trying to do is show a more realistic perspective of the world of Game of Thrones. Like how do the real people, how do the average Joe, survive in this world, right? It kind of reminds me of Andor in the sense of, these are not the big A-list characters that we know from House of Dragon or Game of Thrones, but we're focusing on the B tier characters. We're focusing on the characters who are in the background. We want to see how they exist in the world, how they see the world and all that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, that absolutely works for me, right? And yeah, I kind of love the realistic perspective, aesthetic that they use in this too, right? Right down to the dialogue, though. The dialogue is very crass. It's very expletive laden, but it works, right? It really feels like you are in some area in England and you just hear characters sort of run into each other and drop the F word and the C word just because, right? But it's not really done for shock value. At least I would make the argument for that, right? It's really done to kind of show that, yeah, this is the very sardonic world that's being painted here, right? But yeah, I kind of flat out enjoy this too. And last thing I'll say, right? I think for me, the big reason why I enjoy this film so much, this show so much, right, is because of how short these episodes are. These clock in at about 30 minutes. So it's a very easy binge. Even though I just watched it one episode and then I'll pause, do some work, come back, watch the next episode, and go on, right? I'll keep doing that, right? But yeah, this is a very easy binge, right? And the story is very simple and straightforward. You don't have to do too much mental legwork as far as connecting the characters with what we saw in House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones. But it will help if you know who certain characters are and certain names and houses. Okay, it will help you in terms of, oh, that's why that name or that name or that house matters in the long run, right? But yeah, it's simple, it's to the point, and yeah, it absolutely works. And I just had to spoil one moment in the finale, right? I actually watched this this morning time of me recording this, right? It's like
Right.
spoiler before I get to this spoiler here. There's gonna be a second season, right? So given how this show ends, I guess we're gonna see what happens to Egg when he gets older and what he learns from Duncan, right? That's all I'll see. But yeah, in the final episode, dog, my jaw dropped when I hear this, when I heard this, right? Because yes, they will drop like a couple of needle drops in this as well, right? Like needle drops, huh? Not just music from the show that from the shows or the score or whatnot, right? But no, they drop a jazz song in this. And how they use it. And when I see that, I was like, "Huss, I fucks with this show, man." Because throughout the show, I was like, "I fuck with that. I fucks with that real dread." When they literally drop that jazz song and how they use it, I was like, "All right, round of applause. This show real hard. This show real hard, right?" So this is the subversive take on the Game of Thrones franchise that I didn't ask for. I didn't know that I needed, but I kind of sort of needed as well, right? And it shows that you could tell more stories out of this universe, right? Because I don't know how much more seasons of House of Dragon that we'll get, right? Maybe we might get two more. I don't know, right? I don't think that it will run to 7 seasons like Game of Thrones. I think HBO will learn a lesson from that, right? But you could just pull from a novella, you could pull from a side story, you could invent your own story, if you will, right? And just continue to explore this world, right? So in a way, you can kind of see this as like the early development into Game of Thrones being like this Star Wars esque juggernaut. Like it's not there as yet, eh? Like we still have like decades to go, right? But the way how like this show and House of Dragon moving, it could very well be a sign that we could get more spin-offs of this universe, right? I do hope and I do think that we will not get like a lot of these shows, like the Star Wars shows. I don't think they're gonna do that, right? God forbid, right? But this spin-off direction, I think absolutely works. This prequel direction, I think absolutely works as well, right? I don't know if you'll get stuff after Game of Thrones, especially seeing how people were turned off by that series finale. But I guess you'll see, right? But yeah, this is a step in the right direction. I can't be mad at any of this, right? So yeah, no surprise. This is one of the best shows that I've seen this year. One of the best TV shows I've seen this year, right? Because of how different it was, right? How unique it was, how it subverted its own material, how it subverts people's expectations. And yeah,
Right.
this pretty much gives you this underdog story that is more relatable than you'd expect as well too. Because yeah, you kind of want to see this guy shine, you want to see this person achieve and make it big. But yeah, he's constantly being reminded of what he does not have, what he lacks, and what he needs in this world, and how there might not be a chance that he will even attain it, even if he becomes a knight, right? But how the show explores that was kind of brilliant in my opinion. How it blends comedy with the action, with the humor, how it blends the humor with the action and the drama absolutely works for me. Yeah, this show is great in my opinion. So for me, rating wise, like 4.5 out of 5. This is one of the best shows I've seen, so far this year. Again, just go in knowing that this is not House of Dragon, this is not Game of Thrones. But if you want to see a nice diversion from that formula, and if you just want to see a great story being told in the Game of Thrones universe, yeah, definitely check this out, right? But lastly, if you're going into this one without having seen any of the previous shows, I would recommend if you're still kind of nervous about watching Game of Thrones, I will recommend watching the first 2 seasons of House of Dragon, as this show kind of brilliantly dovetails from what we saw in those 2 seasons, right? But yeah,
Right.
I absolutely enjoy this. What he has best, strongly recommend this show.